Pastor Mike with you. Listen, I've got a question. How much is your future worth? I mean, really, how much do you value your own particular destiny? And then that becomes a question of investing. How much is it worth investing in? You know, they say in life that you only get out of it what you put in it. So what if I were to tell you that I can help you get more money than you've ever gotten before, have more happiness than you've ever had before, and have more peace than you've ever had before? I want you to join me on my coaching platform called The Wisdom Blueprint. The Wisdom Blueprint is simply the what to, the how to, everything you need to know to have more joy, to have more peace, to have more money. Join me on the Wisdom Blueprint every month. It's a monthly subscription, no contracts necessary, cancel at any time, and get the insight, the intel you need that will take your life, your ministry, your business to the next level. I'm talking about the Wisdom Blueprint. Sign up today. Welcome one and all to another edition of Sundays with yours truly, Michael Norman. It's a joy and a pleasure to be with you today on this Resurrection Sunday. So many of us are celebrating the fact that Jesus, the Messiah, has risen from the grave, and he has risen to die no more and to reign forevermore. So happy Easter, happy resurrection. And in honor of that, today I'm going to be teaching from this very familiar phenomenon that has taken place. As a matter of fact, it is that which has established the whole idea of the New Testament church. And I want to share a bit of insight and revelation on it. That's why I entitled it today, The Revelation of the Resurrection. The revelation of the resurrection, because until we begin to understand the greater issue and the greater mystery of the resurrection, what does it mean not only to Christ, but what does it mean to us? Not as a religious organization or a religious gathering or group of things like that, but what does it mean to us as individuals? The fact that Jesus got up and was resurrected. Actually, let me say it this way: that the whole idea, and the whole concept, and the whole the experience of the Christ, how he had to be number one, had to be set apart. And when you're set apart, obviously that's a lonely walk. As they say, it's lonely at the top, but it's really lonely when you begin to realize what purpose for which you are created, because not everybody is called to your very same purpose. So sometimes that walk you have to do alone. Another inference we grab and grasp from the whole Messiah, or from the Passion of the Christ, is that, of course, he had to endure that loneliness. He had to do the subsequent pain and suffering that comes with being alone. I don't care how saved, sanctified, or how long you've been saved or sanctified. We are built as social creatures. God has designed it in such a way that we are not necessarily codependent, but we are independent. We are interdependent. I need you, you need me. In the words of Hezekiah Walker, we are designed to require interaction with one another. As a matter of fact, the very instance of the church is useless if it's not integrative. If it does not integrate into the greater fabric of society, because obviously, if we don't have a society to reach, we won't, and we don't have a message to engage them with, then the whole concept becomes worthless and without cause. And so today we're going to talk about that. in perhaps a brand new way, maybe a way that you've not discussed it in times past, because I want you to listen with fresh ears, look with fresh eyes, and see perhaps what has not been seen, or at least not celebrated, and not. And I, in my opinion, is my humble opinion, that it's not been taught strong enough, long enough, in such a way that it reforms our own idea and concepts of not only who Jesus is, but who we are in Christ. And so I want to deal with that today in honor of this Easter holiday season. We call it Resurrection Sunday, and there's a whole lot of information to be shared in terms of the whole instances of Easter. We'll relent to the idea that it is not Easter in terms of the celebration of the bunny rabbits and eggs and Easter eggs and things of that nature. We'll settle with the idea that that's not a Christian holiday. It's not a Christian event. It's not something that is endorsed by Christianity. However, through the years and centuries, we've kind of adopted the whole idea of Easter and kind of rolled it into the resurrection story of Jesus Christ, and how they both were able to kind of be synergized and elevated to a particular holiday that we are experiencing now. There's a lot to be said concerning that, but that's not the point I'm going to really be arguing or speaking on this afternoon. I want to talk about how we can see the revelation of who we are through the resurrection of who he is, because without his resurrection, we would not have the wherewithal to rise ourselves. Without him recognizing and experiencing what he experienced, we would not know and see with new eyes and with new ears. Again, the whole story of Christ is not just one that rehearses and recites his passion, his experience, and ultimately his death on the cross, which we all celebrate. We all, and of course, we continue to lament, because what a horrible and a vicious death he had to die simply to save us from our sins. It's one thing to die when you deserve to die, but it's another when you die for people who perhaps just to save people. We'll just put it that way. The Romans talks about scarcely would a man die for a righteous person, but Christ commended himself to us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for the ungodly. You gotta give something to that. You gotta be a little impressed with the reality of that he gave himself for people that were by and large unworthy of it. While we were yet ungodly, we were yet without righteousness. We were apart from God, and all that goes with this relationship, this new relationship that has its genesis within the context of the Judeo or Jewish faith that has kind of evolved into a Christian faith. Because, of course, Christianity is a very new concept when it's compared to the backdrop of history, or in particularly Jewish history, because their history goes back at least about 3,000 years or so. And so when you compare 3,000 years with, and that's BC, that's before Christ, okay? And then the whole 2,000 years AD, so you've got their 3,000 to 4,000 years before Christ, plus the persistence of the Jewish faith. Not only so, Judaism doesn't stop at the birth of Christ; it continues. As a matter of fact, that was one of the reasons why there was so much conflict between Jesus and the very Jews that he came to save. Remember, the woman asked him to come and heal her daughter, but he says, I can't, because I'm not called to you. I'm only called to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So this whole Jewish relationship with God was based exclusively, at one time anyway, exclusively with the Jewish people. Now, that in and of itself gives us some sort of insight and inference that the fact that our Christian first of all, back up, that the Jewish faith is an exclusive faith. Now, there may be opportunities for, us to convert to Judaism, and the law or the traditions of the Jewish faith does give concessions to those who would like to convert to Judaism. But by and large, it's an exclusive. You have to be a Jew or a Jewish person to have this relationship with God. Because again, their whole concept is that God introduces himself to Abram. Abram becomes Abraham. And there is no real such thing as Hebrew or Israeli people, because without Abraham, none of that would be possible. Without Abraham accepting this offer that comes from God for him to be his people and let God be his God, and Abraham be his people, there is no inference, there is no entrance as far as Jewish people are concerned. That Israel is not per se a geographical location. It's not a location as much as it is a people. So when you're talking about Israel, you must understand there would not be any such thing. However, again, that being said, it underscores the idea that a relationship with God necessitates that you become a Jew, because after all, God introduced himself to the Jewish people first, according to Jewish antiquity. So, because even what we have as Christianity is based on the historicity of Jewish, how would I say, history? We'll just put it like that. So anyway, that's an interesting concept. If you're one who likes to study and research and dig into things, that in itself is a very, very interesting topic to look at. It's worth looking into. It's worth discovering. But I'm not going to deal with that on this particular broadcast. Again, my focus today is going to be for us to uncover and discover the revelation of the resurrection. Now, we can have all kinds of discussions concerning the validity of the story of Christ. Some are atheists, some are agnostics, and some are just other religion. There are people who approach God from a different story, from a different belief system. And so this one we're talking about has to do with Christianity and its affiliation and association and assimilation within the body of Jesus Christ. Okay, so that being said, I want to deal with it from a biblical standpoint so that you can appreciate the narrative of the passion of the Christ, to the point that it does not only represent a compelling story of history, but it also reveals a current day truth in us, so that everything that happened to him can be experienced with us. That it's not just Christ and Christ alone in terms of the things that he went through or the things that we'll have to go through, so that we can experience this whole idea of being born again. The issue of being born again is based solely on the fact that we accept the fact that Jesus died for our sin, was buried, and resurrected on the third day. So I want to look at it today. I want to help you today understand it in a new way. And speaking of help, make sure, guys, that as you're coming in, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure that you click the like button, the notification button, and the subscribe button. And then, of course, if you're watching on any other place, please make sure that you share. If you're watching on Facebook, share this broadcast with at least 10 of your friends, so it will help us. These algorithms are all mysterious, and you can't reach more people on the efforts and the strength of your own broadcast. I have to have your help in doing so, okay? So again, welcome to the Team Scarborough. Bless you guys. Thank you for joining in. Team Arnold's on board, and I see you, Carla. Bless you. Good to see you. I hope all is well with you, praying for you and praying with you concerning your own health and our children in that regard. So God bless you, and thank you for joining us. And for those of you who have not revealed your identity yet, bless you too. God bless you, and thank you for joining in. And for those who are going to join me later, thank you for joining us. All right, so let's go over. I want to open up with a bit of a bit of a opening statement, if you would allow me to. So let me put it like this. Some ministry have used this week as an opportunity to remind you of the passion of the Christ, how that he was accused falsely, led from judgment hall to judgment hall, verbally and physically abused, hung on a criminal's cross, and finally being buried in a borrowed tomb, only to be risen on the third day. Therefore, today I will not, as I said earlier, will not be rehearsing this timeless, ageless story and account. Instead, I would like to spend our time together giving you the deeper mystery of the passion of the Christ. Now, I said that to say this, that you have to recognize whenever you're reading Scripture, the Scriptures are not just simply for theological consumption. In other words, I don't believe that God is trying to make us all little theologians as believers. I believe the whole idea of Scripture is so that we can perceive God in a certain way and understand that perception and understand the relationship that exists between God and man. So that being said, not everything that you read in the Bible is for literal consumption. Some of it, and quite a bit of it, as a matter of fact, is allegorical. Some are metaphysical, and again, they're designed to create an image in our mind and in our concept. Why? Because we as human beings, we don't see with our eyes, we see with our minds. Let me say that again. The reason Jesus would teach the way that he taught, using allegorical structure, allegorical stories, or AKA parables, is so that we can begin to understand the deeper meaning, because every parable is not about the parable itself. It's a story within the story, but you can't not begin to understand the deeper things until you understand the superficial thing. So when God talks about a seed, that's a point that we all understand, but we understand how a seed operates once it's planted into the earth. So if you understand that principle, then you'll understand that Jesus himself was a seed. Now, we already know and believe that he was not an actual seed. He was an individual. He's a human, but he's making the analogy, and he's drawing that similarity to a seed, himself to a seed. So if you understand how the seed is buried in the ground, then you'll understand how he's buried in the ground, because when a seed is buried into the ground, that's not the end of the story. Every seed that is buried, the Bible says that except a seed falls to the ground and it dies or is buried, it remains alone. But if it is buried, then it yields a harvest. And so the idea is that if Jesus becomes buried into the earth, he's going to bring forth a harvest of many believers or many Jesus Christ. Now hear me straight now. I'm not saying that you or I am the Christ, but I am saying I am essentially a harvest. I represent the harvest that seed of Jesus Christ being buried in the ground represents. In other words, it's manifest based on the seed that is. So let me put it like this as well, because many know the story of how, and we preached it, how the devil was having a party one night when they crucified the Christ, and he thought he had it all done. We finally got him. We finally crucified him. We finally killed this man, Jesus, only to realize 3 days later he rose from the dead. Man, what a buzzkill that had to be. The fact that Jesus was risen from the dead. But it's only because he wasn't buried. He was simply planted. And everything that is planted is going to rise again. You only bury dead things. You can put that in the chat. You only bury dead things. But the things that are planted are temporary. In other words, everything that's planted rises again. And the good thing about it is, whatever you plant, it's not what's going to rise up from the earth. It's going to come up in a multiplied and an increased and an evolve and a more expansive way. In other words, if I put a seed in the ground, I'm not going to harvest a seed. I'm going to harvest a crop. So it works like this. If I want orange trees I have to plant an orange seed. So in order to get this harvest of trees, orange trees, I have to bury an orange seed. So you don't bury an orange seed with the idea that one day I'm looking forward to more seeds coming forth out of the ground. No, you're looking forward to a tree that has oranges on it, with those oranges having even more seed. So it's an incredible allegory. It's an incredible illustration of when Christ dies and is buried or planted into the ground, it makes sense that he's going to rise up in many forms. Like you, like me, like us. Because when the enemy thought he killed one, what he did was release many more. Except the seed remains in the ground, it remains alone. But when it's buried, it gives a harvest of many. So again, that's why Jesus can make claims like, when you see me, you've seen the Father. Because again, I and he are one. Now, I know that's blasphemous in a lot of circles, but the reality, the proof is in the pudding. Now, I didn't write it. That's not my statement. That's what Jesus says himself. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And you'll see through the text today that if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. It's just that bold and just that wonderful. So we are in him as he is in us. Let me take you to 1 John. We're going to look at the 4th chapter and the 16th verse. Here's what it says. And we have known and believed that the love that God has to us. God is love, and he that dwelleth in love dwells in God, and God in him. Now, that's King James language, but you got to appreciate the depth of what it is he's saying. He's saying that if we walk in love, then we essentially walk in God. Why? Because God himself is love. Now, he's not a God who loves. God is love. So that's a big distinction from that. And I'm going to read it from another version or translation in just a moment. Let me go on to the 17th verse. Herein is our love made perfect, that we may have boldness in the day of judgment, because as he is, so are we in this world. This is the real crust of the matter. This is the juice. This is the power. This is the plug right here. Because he's saying we can have boldness in the day of judgment. Why? Because I'm not afraid. I'm not fearful. I'm not dreading the day of judgment. I'm really looking forward to the day of judgment, because I can have a certain confidence that when I see him face to face, then we will see him as he is, because we shall be like him. It takes one to know one. You can't recognize what you're not. You can't recognize something that you're not. You know, that doesn't mean you have to become something to recognize in terms of physical form. But if you recognize that there's certain attributes, certain characterizations that I possess or that Christ possessed, then if I possess those same characters, those same traits, then when I see him, I'll recognize him, because I possess some of the same traits that he has. Okay, stay with me. Don't go too far. I know I'm building something. I'm taking the scenic route, but I want to hopefully don't lose you on any of the turns. Okay, so it's important for us to recognize this whole principle of the seed. Again, I won't go back and reteach it, but it's important for us to labor on the idea that a seed produces harvest, and everything that is in the seed will be in the harvest, or everything that is in the harvest started in the seed. That's just how it works. Everything that is in the seed that's planted in the ground will be found in the product that's produced in the harvest. An apple seed cannot produce a watermelon tree, if such a thing. There's no such thing, but you get what I'm saying. You can't plant an apple seed and get an orange tree. You can't plant an apple seed and get an olive tree. And an apple seed will produce an apple harvest. That's just the way that it is, okay? All right, let's go back again and read some more of this 1 John, the 4th chapter. Look what it says again in the 17th verse. Herein is our love made perfect, that we may have boldness in the day of judgment, because as he is, so are we in this world. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear, because fear has what? Torment. Now, this is one of the main reasons you have to get rid of fear out of your life, because fear does not empower you. If you give in to it, it will sabotage you. It will weaken you. It doesn't empower. It takes away your power. So we have to get rid of fear, but the only way you can really put fear in its place, because you can't completely eradicate fear from your life, because you're going to encounter it in various places of your life that you've never gone before. If you're going to try to do what you've never done, by and large, fear is going to accompany that new endeavorment, because you've never been there before. And we always fear what we've never been, where we've never been. We always fear what we don't understand. But the only way we can understand it is to confront the thing that we are afraid of. I'll say this, just a few months back, my daughters and I, we went up 18,000 feet into the air, inside of an airplane. The airplane taxied, jumped inside the airplane, it taxied down the runway, and then it began to rise from the runway into the air until it reached 18,000 feet into the air. Now, most people will be satisfied with that because you feel like you're on your way to your destination. But no, not us. No, because at that point, at 18,000 feet in the air, that is when the doors of the airplane were opened. And guess what? We jumped out. We skydived 18,000 feet in the air. We didn't plunge to our death. Thank God. We had parachute. We were tethered, actually, with another experienced parachuter. But the point I'm making is we went up, we faced what we feared, even though we were afraid. So you're not going to eradicate fear from your life. Certain things you're going to have to be able to do it, and do it afraid. Knees trembling, knees knocking, hands trembling, every kind of thing going on. Feel everything in your biological body is telling you to turn back. Don't do it. Don't go there. Stop. Everything in you, but your mind and your will says, no, I'm going to do this, even though I'm scared out of my wits. But you do it anyway, because that's the only time you're going to experience, new encounters, new things, new blessings. Let's go back to it. Verse 17 again says, herein is our love made perfect, that we have boldness in the day of judgment, because as he is, so are we in this world. There is no fear in love, but perfect love, or perfected love, casts out fear. You know why it casts out fear? It's because fear will always try to rear its head in your life time and time again. No matter how many times you've confronted it, it will come back again if you're trying new things, or new places, and new opportunities. There's always going to be the potential for fear, but if you're walking and persist to walk in love, and I'm not talking, and I got to say it like this again. I know I've said it before, but I got to say it again. When you walk in love, that does not mean, hear me on this, that does not mean that you become a doormat for someone else to walk upon. Because I'm walking in love. I can let my husband beat me because I'm walking in love. I can let my wife beat me because no, that's not love. As a matter of fact, that's the very opposite of love, because love is not something that hurts. Love is not supposed to bring harm to you, okay? And because oftentimes we equate love to based on how we feel, the sweaty palms, the palpitating heart, that sort of thing, the hair standing up on our neck, goosebumps and things. We equate all that with love. That's not love. That could be something else. It could be a heart attack. Could be a stroke. We don't know, but it's not love. So please understand that simply because you feel a certain way, you have a certain physiological response to another individual, whether it's your boyfriend or your girlfriend, your husband or your wife. That's wonderful if you have it, but it's not the proof that you're in love, because love is not an emotion. Okay? If you grasp that, that alone will save you years of suffering. When you understand that love is not an emotion, it's a decision. You have to decide to walk in love. You have to decide to be long-suffering. You have to decide to be meek and kind and gentle. You get what I'm saying? Those are things you have to decide to be in order to walk in love. So love is not an emotion. Love is a decision. You have to, as they say, love is what it does. Love does not hurt. Love does not take pleasure in hurting other people. If you're being hit and abused physically or verbally, in my book, you need to seize the first opportunity to remove yourself from that danger. Because what starts out as physical abuse is eventually going to end up in physical, whatever starts out as verbal abuse is going to ultimately end up in physical abuse. So please understand. So don't be blind in it. Don't be so caught up in what you think is traditional love, or that God doesn't want me to divorce my husband because God hates divorce. Yes, God does hate divorce, but not divorcees. I need to take a pause right here to include this parenthetically, that God hates divorce, but he still loves divorcees. Okay? He hates the whole idea of divorce because of the pain and the suffering that it heaps upon both the husband and the wife. There's no winners in a divorce. There's no winner. Even if you get all of the money, you get all of the child custodies, there's still no winner, because there's going to be some horrific side effects of the divorce. It's the ripping away of two souls that were once fused together by a supernatural power of God in the presence of many witnesses. So whenever there's a divorce, it's a tearing away. So anything you tear is going to have some correlating evidence of that tear. So it may show up in your children. It may show up in yourself, even if you won the divorce case. Divorce is really a sue. You're suing each other for custody of the children, for monetary compensation and things of that nature. It's a lawsuit. It's a legal suing one for divorce. So you may win that, but you're still going to have the effects of divorce. That's why God hates divorce, but he does not hate divorcees. I always have to remind people of that, because they feel like they have to stay in an abusive and neglectful marriage because God hates divorce. Yes, he does hate divorce, but he loves divorcees. God hates divorce, not divorcees. God hates the effects of divorce, not the people who get the divorce. All right. Thought I should throw that in parenthetically. Let's get back to the scriptures here. So it says in the 18th verse, there's no fear in love, but perfect love casts out all fear, because fear has torment. That fear is not made, because fear has torment. He that fear is not made perfected or perfect in love. We love him because he first loved us. If a man says, I love God, and hates his brother, he is a liar. Now that's pretty strong language right there. If you say you love God, but you can't stand your brother, and I'm not talking about your natural brother, born in the same family. I'm talking about your brother in humanity. Because at the end of the day, we're all interrelated. You're my brother and my sister. Although you may not live with me, you may not have grown up with me, we may not have gone to the same school together, but we're still a part of the same family. We're still a part of the human race. There's only one race of people, and that's the human race. So we're all interconnected on some certain levels, okay? You can't escape your responsibility to me, and I can't escape my responsibility to you. I can't just arbitrarily do you harm, and you can't arbitrarily do me harm, because in doing so, we both will reap some sort of repercussion. All right, so please understand, there's no separation when it comes to humanity. We're all brothers and sisters. So, but he says, though, you can't love God. See how powerful this is? 18th verse. Let me read it again. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear, because fear has torment. He that fear is not made perfect in love. He that fears is not made perfect in love. 20th verse says, 19th verse rather, we love him because he first loved us. If a man says that I love God and hates his brother, he is a liar. For he that loves not his brother whom he sees, how can he love God whom he hath not seen? You see the dichotomy that exists. You can't love God if you can't love your brother. It's impossible. You know, you can make me believe that you love by your comments, your statements, or whatever you might say with your mouth. But as they say, talk is cheap. That, you know, and it's cheap, and it's doubly cheap twice on Sundays. So talk is cheap. So if I raise my hand in loving devotion to this all-powerful, all-seeing, all-knowing God, and at the same time take those same hands that I lift to God and wrap them around the neck of my brother, God says that love is bogus. It's fraudulent. You're lying if you say you love God and hate your brothers. Because he's simply saying, I mean, it's a very common sense sort of thing. How can you love a God you've never seen and hate your brother who was made in the image of God and the likeness of God? No matter how he's acting right now, no matter how she's acting right now, you cannot deny the reality that that brother and that sister is made in the image of God. So if you love God, you have to, by default, love your neighbor. You have to. You can't do one without the other. Okay? You can't love God and hate your neighbor. Okay? And you can't hate your neighbor and love God. It doesn't work. Okay? Let's go on. So the 20th verse again says, if a man says, I love God and hates his brother, he is a liar. For he that loveth not his brother whom he sees, how can he love God whom he cannot see? And this commandment have we from him, that he who love God love his brother also. That is again, and this commandment, notice it's a commandment, not a feeling. And this commandment we have from him, God, that he who love God love his brother also. If you're going to love God, it's really kind of an interesting thing that God says, I'm not interested in how much you love me if you don't love one another. Remember in Jesus' final prayer, and I'll move on just a little bit more here, but in Jesus' final prayer, he prayed, Father, make them one even as we are one, so that the world will know that you sent me. The world will know that you sent me by how they love one another. You see how Jesus puts the whole validity of who he is and what he's done based on how we, his people, get along with each other. That's powerful. I don't think I would do that. I would never put the validity of my ministry, my business, based on somebody else's conduct. I would never put the credibility of my work that my blood, sweat, and tears have built. I am never going to turn around and then place the validity of what it is I provide, whether it's a service or a product. I'm never going to tell you that I build the best computer tablets in the world. And I can prove it based on how they conduct themselves. Never going to do that. I might put it on my conduct, but I'll never put the validity of my entire product, my whole ministry, my whole business based on how somebody else's acts or conduct themselves. I'll never do that. But Jesus did. I don't know why, but that's what he says, that the validity of the fact that you sent me will be determined based on how they conduct themselves with one another, so that the world would know that you sent me by the love that they show one for another. So the high order is for us to love one another. Now, that's not really why I started this broadcast. It's kind of went off the rails here, but I hope you're getting the gist of this, because I believe this is what the Spirit of the Lord would have you and I to understand, and not only understand it, but begin to walk in it. There are people I don't particularly care for in this world, but I don't actively pursue their destruction, and I don't actively promote the fact that I don't love them. Or like them, for that matter. You know, we love everybody, but we don't have to like everybody. Well, there's people I just don't like. Okay? But I don't promote that fact. I don't celebrate that fact. Because what has probably happened, I've tried to indulge them and tried to see things from their perspective, but they will not relent their point of view. And if it doesn't make sense to me, it's difficult for me to make it make sense. So it means that, well, okay, let me institute the word that says, how can two walk together except they be agreed? If we can't walk together under the umbrella of agreement, then that must mean you go your way and I'll go my way, but I'll never raise a finger against you. And prayerfully, you'll never raise a finger against me. We may not see eye to eye on everything, and we won't. It's impossible. But if we don't, we're not going to crucify each other because of our differences. Okay? Oh, this has went way longer than I anticipated going. All right, but I got to finish this last verse. And the 21st verse says, "And this commandment have we from him, that he who loved God love also his brothers." You can't love God without loving your brothers and your sisters. Now, here's a few bullet points I want you to get. When it comes to the whole concept of Easter, let me just really get through this. I don't really have time to unpack this the way that I would normally like to do it, but here we go. Again, Easter is all about rebirth, or the birthing forth. We celebrate the rebirthing, the born again Christ. He's the first fruit of many brethren. So he's the beginning of what should happen for many others that would follow after him. In actuality, this whole born again process is not really, and hear me when I say this, it's not really a New Testament concept. The idea of being born again has predates Christianity by thousands and thousands of years. So the whole concept of rebirth actually dates back thousands of years before the Christ. But what it does say, and it initiates the reality that you can't go into the new life until you are born again. In other words, you can't go to new places until you leave old places. Okay? You can't go to the next if you're holding on to your ex. And the interesting thing is that's not just as apparent as that is, but sometimes it even goes into the spiritual realm, in that you can't go on to the next encounter with God while holding on to the last encounter you had with God. Sometimes the greatest threat to your next level is your last level. Sometimes the greatest threat to your next promotion is your last promotion, because we as human beings, what we tend to do is we will build a memorial around the encounter and we'll stay there. And it becomes a memorial rather than a memory. See, so God is not telling us to build memorials. He's just simply building memory. Do not forget where you come from, but don't be tethered to where you were trying to reach forward to where you're going. It's like you're being torn in two different directions. You can't go both north and south at the same time. You're going to have to make up your mind. Are we going north or are we going south? Because we can't go both ways simultaneously. It's not going to happen. All right. So even our cells die and are rebirthed. Approximately, it says, according to science, approximately 1 million cells in our bodies die every second. That means in one day, approximately 1.2 kilograms of cell die. But it's nothing to be worried about, because quite the opposite. It would be a real problem if the cells in your body did not die. Cell death is a completely natural part of the body's recycling or rebirthing of cellular building blocks, and it is actually a precondition for life. So even science promotes the idea that you have to be rebirthed. You have to be reborn, because it shows even in our own bodies that are at a cellular level. Do you not know, even for the scientists, based on what they know about the cell in our bodies, our cells reproduce. I just told you about 1 million cells in your body die every second. I'm being born again even as I'm talking to you, because cells are dying and being replaced with new cells. So I'm literally being born again every moment of the day. So as it is in the spirit, or should I say, as it is in the natural, so it is in the spirit. Okay? You cannot experience next level and new life if you're not wanting to die to the old. Okay, let me go a little bit further. But there's nothing, again, we talked about cell death. It's a completely natural part of the body's recycling of cellular building blocks, and it's actually a precondition for life. If you don't have constant cellular death and rebirthing, then you cannot live. That's how severe this is, that you must have a death and a birth in order to continue to live. But he says here, some people die because cells refuse to die, such as in the case of cancer. A tumor is formed because of the refusal of certain cells to die. And so those cells develop tumors. And because of these tumors, aka cancer, is what's ultimately going to cause the death of the body, because these cells refuse to die. Isn't that amazing? That because your body or your cellular structure has some level of defect in it, that certain cells will not die. And then I guess it has an accumulating effect. That if they don't die and be replaced or replenished, then they turn into tumors, and tumors turn into cancer. So this whole concept of resurrection is not just a spiritual thing, but it's a natural thing. As a matter of fact, the Bible says there are things that are first natural, then spiritual, because Adam was made first. The body was made first. Then the spirit, the ruach, or the pneuma, the ruach was breathed, blown into the human body that already existed, and it became a living soul. Okay, so I hope I'm not overcomplicating this, but it fascinates me that this resurrection is not just about Jesus dying on the cross as much as it is us dying daily. It entails us. It lets us know that we have to be born again, because if we're not born again, we will die the death. Science proves it. Jesus shows it. Okay, so it says, the whole idea of this dying, spiritually speaking, is so that he became like us, so that we could become like him. Now, 2 Corinthians 5:21, you can read it later. 2 Corinthians 5:21 says, "For he hath made him to be sin for us, who knew no sin, that we might be made the righteousness of God in him." So there's a great exchange. So he becomes like me, so that I can become like him. This is why I say, if all you get out of the resurrection story is a sad, sad song about a marvelous man who did no wrong, and they falsely accused him and ultimately killed him, and he died and was risen on the third day, if that's all you got, then you're missing the greater picture. As marvelous as that might be about the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus the Christ, it's not as much about his death, burial, and resurrection as much as it is about your death, burial, and resurrection. Even your cellular body tells you that. Okay? So then, like our cells, which are renewed moment by moment, so should we be renewed moment by moment. We should experience the rebirth on a daily level because we're constantly dying to self. I am crucified with Christ. That's not just a one and done proposition. That's every day. I've got to decide to crucify myself to my old ways, my old habits that ultimately will grow up into tumors and turn into cancer in my own spiritual walk. So I have to learn how to die and appreciate dying daily so that I can live or be rebirthed or reborn or born again daily. Now, that doesn't mean you lose your salvation. That's your position. But sin is your condition. We have to deal with it on a daily basis. The attitudes, disposition, bad behavior, all of that, anger, resentment, hatred, prejudice, pride, arrogance, all of that, that has to be killed off every day. Every day, I've got to decide to humble myself and get rid of arrogance, get rid of resentment. And let me tell you something. I'll confess, complete transparency here. I am one who has had a history of holding on to grudges. I could hold a grudge till Jesus comes. If you ever make me mad, I'm going to stay mad forever. So that's something I have to die to on a consistent level. These, let's see, I've been born again now, and we had to be about maybe 40 years now. So I'm every day, 40 years of saying, all right, time for you to die. You're getting too arrogant. All right, time for you to die. You're walking in resentment. Okay, time for you to die because you were holding on to anger. You got to get rid of rage. You've got to get rid of anger. You've got to get rid of bigotry. You've got to get rid of hatred. All of that has got to go. And if you don't get rid of it, you can't have the rebirth. So we continually shed all unfruitful ways in an effort to reach forward towards greater life that brings prosperity, hope, strength, happiness, and abundance, so that in the day of judgment, we will have confidence towards God, because it will not be the first time that we acknowledge his presence, not just with us, but in us. So if you're expecting that the day that Jesus comes back and the sky is cracked and that's the day that you're going to be saved, you've missed the whole picture. You missed the whole idea. Let me finish. I got to close out with this. Jesus faced the whole passion of the Christ. Jesus has to face his moment with trepidation. So when it comes to being reborn, you're going to have to face your own issues. And it may bring apprehension. It may be you might be reluctant, or you may have some sort of nervous energy about it. But if you face those things that are holding you to your current situation, you've been living a cyclical life, the same things over and over again, until you face that. And it's going to take maybe some fear, but you're going to have to do it anyway. It might be fearful. It might be something that you've never done before, but you're going to have to do it anyway. And when you do that, you're preparing yourself for that resurrection. Number two, Jesus had to face it alone. Sometimes you're going to go through what it is you have to go through by yourself. There's not going to be a prayer partner. There's not going to be a battle buddy or anybody to stand with you, but you're going to have to do it, because some things you have to do alone so that you can recognize that God has been with you the whole time. So you have to do it alone. Jesus looked for an out. Jesus himself looked for an out, a loophole. He says, Father, if it be possible, can this cup pass me by? Is it possible for me to circumvent all of this that I have to go through? He says, but nevertheless, not my will, but thy will be done. Let me give you another point. Jesus expected his necessary pain to experience resurrection. Excuse me. That word, Jesus experienced his necessary pain in order to experience resurrection and transformation. There's some things you got to face. Like I said, a fear of height. But 18,000 feet later, we're up there. We're like, there's no turning back now. We're up here. We might as well jump. And that's what we did. We never would have experienced the glory of free falling with a parachute. From 18,000 feet, you're floating in the air as the parachute opens. You see things that you never would see on the ground at 18,000 feet. And you're soaring like the birds, and you're floating to the ground effortlessly, not crashing, but floating to the ground. Jesus died in a place called Golgotha, and this is the greatest one I'm going to leave you with. His death ultimately brought him to the place of the skull. So what does that represent? I told you it's illustrious. It's an allegory because, again, the skull represents where the mind or the brain is contained. And except that brain be transformed by the renewing of your mind, you will not be able to experience the resurrection. It'll be just a story. Jesus died, and that's really sad. Most of us get saved because we pity Jesus. He's an innocent man. They wrongly accused him. They abused him physically, and then they killed him and buried him. And he did that for me, and we feel sorry for him. And so we say, well, the least I can do is give my life to him. That's not how the story goes. He's trying to tell you, my dear friend, you have to experience your resurrection. But everything that he went through, you'll have to go through by yourself, doing it fearfully. I'm afraid, but I'm going to do it anyway. I've never been here before, never been by myself before, but I'm going to do it anyway. I have to go to the place of the skull and be renewed by the transforming of my mind so that I can have this resurrection. I'm going to do it anyway. And when you do that, this is when the resurrection becomes personal. It's no longer a Bible story, but it is now your story. Now go forth and live it out. What's up, fam? It's Pastor Mike with you. Listen, I've got a question. How much is your future worth? I mean, really, how much do you value your own particular destiny? And then that becomes a question of investing. How much is it worth investing in? You know, they say in life that you only get out of it what you put in it. So what if I were to tell you that I can help you get more money than you've ever gotten before, have more happiness than you've ever had before, and have more peace than you've ever had before? I want you to join me on my coaching platform called The Wisdom Blueprint. The Wisdom Blueprint is simply the what to, the how to, everything you need to know to have more joy, to have more peace, to have more money. Join me on the Wisdom Blueprint every month. It's a monthly subscription, no contracts necessary, cancel at any time, and get the insight, the intel you need that will take your life, your ministry, your business to the next level. I'm talking about the Wisdom Blueprint. Sign up today. Make sure that you get on board with the Wisdom Blueprint. We've just uploaded a whole bunch of new videos. More is to come. So if you're a subscriber to the Wisdom Blueprint, we've got more content coming your way. Don't you give up. But remember, it's not a contract necessary. You don't have to fill out contracts or agreements. You can cancel at any time. But you need this constant infusion of wisdom and knowledge, even if you already heard it before, because faith does not come by having heard. Faith comes by hearing, constantly hearing it, because you need that constant regimen to build and sustain your faith. All right, so make sure you go to MichaelNormanMinistries.com and sign up for the Wisdom Blueprint, and make sure that you get these constant videos so it can help fortify your faith, strengthen you in a more significant way. Hey, I also want to make sure that I take this moment to invite you to be with us next Sunday. If you're listening to this broadcast, you already missed this Sunday. So plan to join us next Sunday at 9 a.m. at the Movement Church, 2160 North Hiawassee Road, Orlando, Florida, at 9 a.m. and be our very special guest. Also, I want to remind you, if you've enjoyed Songs in the Night, I would sit out on Monday nights and play little gospel, little jazz. If you're into music, it's coming back. So stay tuned. Back to Monday nights here on this channel. Songs in the Night, it's coming because there's a very special day coming. On date night, I want you to mark it down. July 29th at 6 p.m. Songs in the Night is going live. We're going to be live right here in Orlando, Florida, July 20, I think I said 29th. But I'll tell you more about it as the date approaches. But join us on tomorrow. Tomorrow night, Songs in the Night, we're going to give you some rebroadcast and let you enjoy that. And then again, prepare to join us on the 29th of July for the Songs in the Night live experience. It's going to be awesome. You're going to enjoy it, I promise you. I've got some very special guests that are going to join me for a live encounter that's going to be an incredible blessing to your life. So plan to join us, okay? All right, well, that's all I have for you today. Again, I love you. I appreciate you. Come join us. Come see us. Join us again Wednesday night. I'll be back for Wednesday's Word, so you don't want to miss that. 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time right here where you're watching right now. We'll see you next time, all right? And thank you again for all my partners, for your constant prayers and your constant financial support. We need your constant financial support in order to continue to do what we're doing ministry-wise, okay? We're going into foreign countries, providing water. Right now, we've been doing this for the last 15 years, doing water in Africa. I love it, and I thank you for all those who support us in our efforts to bless foreign nations and here in America. You can do that by the ways you see there, Cash App, PayPal, and of course, if you're writing a check, make it payable to Michael Norman Ministries, P.O. Box 850, Apopka, Florida, 32704, and we are so grateful for your continued and prayerful support. We'll see you next time.